Hi everybody, Merry Christmas. My name is Lisa and I'm the astrologer behind the website astrologysphere.com. You may also have come across my Astro Insights blog where I talk about the astrology of current affairs, political events, celebrities and so on. We're coming to the end of 2019 and before we leave this particular year and decade, we're going to be experiencing a solar eclipse in Capricorn. Now, this is significant for a number of reasons, and I thought it might be interesting to kind of talk about these, given that we're heading into a brand new decade. And I suppose I should also say that eclipses are something of an interest of mine. I've been writing about eclipses now for the last 15 years or so from an astrological point of view. So I thought it might be nice to share a little bit of what I've kind of learned and um, some of the interesting patterns that I've kind of picked up over the years with regards to eclipses and with regards to the last 10 years that you might find of interest from your own point of view and for your own life. I should also say that I plan to do some um, predictions based on zodiac signs, but those will be in separate videos. So this is kind of more of an overview of what eclipses are, why this one is significant, and so on. Um, yeah. Okay, so without any further ado, um, I suppose the best place to start is to say that over the last 10 years or so, we've been experiencing a lot of eclipses in cardinal signs, particularly in Cancer and Capricorn. So this began in 2010 when we had what's called the cardinal event. It began with a solar eclipse in Cancer, and at that time it sort of set in motion quite a few, well, a grand cross basically, which involved outer planets in cardinal signs. So we had Uranus in Aries, we had Saturn in Libra, we had the Sun and the Moon, I think, in Cancer. There could have been more planets. And trying to think if there was anything in Capricorn at the time. I don't think so. But it set in motion um, a sort of series of energetic events that I think have been kind of ricocheting through the decade, and that have led to major political changes, social changes. I mean, we only have to sort of think about, you know, the Arab Spring for one, and then shifts in the political landscape, particularly in Europe and the UK with the Euro crisis. It's all came off the back of Pluto's entry into Capricorn in 2008, which was just at the time of the global financial crisis, and Pluto has been kind of moving through Capricorn slowly and forcing kind of restructuring, reform in political power structures, and also in terms of major corporations and institutions like banking, but also uncovering corruption, abuse in institutions like the church. In Before that, it exposed a lot of hidden corruption in sport when it was in Sagittarius. So this is something to kind of bear in mind, particularly as we go into January 2020, when Pluto and Saturn will meet in Capricorn, the same sign as this particular eclipse. So you could say that this particular eclipse now is almost like a prelude to what's to come in January, which is quite a big deal because Saturn and Pluto only make a conjunction to each other once every 35 years. So, and these are two really major planets sort of coming together. So, but anyway, we'll talk about that in a little bit when I get onto the lunar eclipse in Cancer, which will happen just before that. So back to the actual solar eclipse itself. So this solar eclipse will happen in around about 4 degrees of Capricorn. So if you've got planets in 4 degrees of any of the cardinal signs, then this could be a personal eclipse for you. So the cardinal signs are Aries, Libra, Cancer, and Capricorn. So you might just want to have a look at your chart to see whether you've got any sort of major points at that within, I'd say, 5 degrees on, kind of either side of that. And then look at the house, because that will determine what kind of life area this is likely to sort of impact for you. But on a general level, this eclipse will take place in what's known as the Three South Saros family. Now, these names have been given to the Saros cycles by the Australian astrologer Bernadette Brady, and they've kind of become standard throughout the astrological community. And Saros cycles are families of eclipses that occur once every 18.6 years. And they also have a kind of birth chart, which she has sort of worked out. So each of them has their own particular energetic signature. So it's worth knowing about that too, and I do cover this in my eclipse forecast, which you can access, if you remember. So this particular one, Bernadette Brady associates with either lessons that come about as a result of unexpected events occurring on trips, or as a result of sudden endings in relationships, particularly with young people or with people that may be slightly immature. So that's something to bear in mind. Now, this ties into something that I think was quite strong during the previous eclipse cycle, which we're kind of moving out of, we're kind of moving to a new eclipse cycle once we get to the solar eclipse. So the previous eclipse cycle began at the solar eclipse in Cancer on the 2nd of July 2019, and I think for a lot of people this was quite a difficult 6 months, this particular, the Cancer solar eclipse. It really sort of precipitated a time of going inward, looking at emotional patterns, family dynamics, unconscious beliefs, and patterns that were impacting on close relationships, leading to self-sabotage, making people feel insecure, and really kind of stopping them from finding happiness on a sort of personal level. And this particular solar eclipse cycle will come to an end at the lunar eclipse in Cancer, which will happen on the 10th of January 2020, so just before the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. And that will really kind of signal a point of major release. And for some, that may involve letting go of some people, possibly that we've outgrown, and or just people that we've kind of developed not bad habits, but where we've kind of got into sort of like codependent situations, toxic dynamics that perhaps aren't healthy for either party. And it's possible that over the last 6 months we've done a lot of inner growth work. We've realized that perhaps certain things need to change, and we might have done the work, maybe the other parties haven't, or vice versa. But needless to say, don't be surprised if you start to shed certain acquaintances or associations that you may have had in your life for a very long time, because you're growing, because they're growing, and so on. So that's just something to bear in mind. So eclipses, in a way, are very much like turbocharged lunar cycles, and solar eclipses tend to happen at the new moon, and lunar eclipses always happen at the full moon. So solar eclipses tend to have the energy of new moons about them. So they are conjunctions of the sun and moon, when the sun and moon are in the same sign or the same side of the earth. And full moons and lunar eclipses happen when the sun and the moon are on either side of the earth. So they're kind of opposite each other, in opposition. So solar eclipses begin 6-month cycles, and this particular one will begin a 6-month cycle focusing on the area of career, social roles and status, public life, public office, social conventions, and it will be asking us to basically work on finding our niche, finding our soul purpose, and kind of marrying this with our job, career, vocation. It'll also be about developing a sense of authority, stepping into our power, stepping up as far as taking on extra responsibilities, and social obligations is concerned. So in a sense, it's about commitments, taking on more commitments. Um, so it's very much about the more public sphere of life as opposed to the private sphere of life. And in a way, you could say that it's balancing out the energies that we've been working on during the Cancer solar eclipse cycle, which is now phasing out. So that's something to bear in mind. Um, the other thing is that this eclipse happens as quite a few planets are going into the sign of Capricorn. So there's going to be a really sort of, by the time we get to January 12, when we have the Saturn and Pluto conjunction, we will have a stellium of planets all in the sign of Capricorn. So this is really emphasizing this energy quite strongly for the collective and for ourselves. And this began when Jupiter entered Capricorn on the 2nd of December. You may have started to feel the shift. This was then followed by the Sun's move into Capricorn on the 21st of December, so at the winter solstice. And then Mercury will join them on the 29th of December. So we'll have quite a few planets in Capricorn. Venus will have moved out. She's already moved into Aquarius. So she was instrumental at the last full moon in helping us to kind of clear out any kind of lingering work that needed to be done before we entered this new 6-month phase. So that's something to bear in mind. So really the emphasis now will be moving from the sort of personal to the political, from the private to the public, from family groupings to society and our relationships, now from the sort of small tribe to the kind of wider whole. So that's something to bear in mind. Of course, a lot will depend as well on where Capricorn falls in your particular natal chart. So it's really important to find that out, because house position will tell you so much more about what life area is likely to be affected, over the next 6 months. But, overall themes, as I say, are going to revolve around, the more kind of public sphere of life. So with that in mind, the other thing to say is that this eclipse will feel different in a lot of ways to the last 6 months. When we had the solar eclipse in Cancer, a lot of planets were retrograde. We had Mercury retrograde, we had Neptune went retrograde, Jupiter was retrograde, and it was really quite a time of going inward. It was quite difficult. It was difficult to communicate. This is going to be very different. A lot of planets are forward, they're direct, and also we've got the Sun and Moon making a conjunction to Jupiter. And Jupiter in the sort of astrological pantheon is considered to be really lucky. It's very expansive energy, it's enthusiastic, it is all about finding meaning. So it's about really finding your sort of purpose, the reason that you're here, and learning to sort of be able to earn a living, or make a success out of something that you feel called to do, but that's meaningful to you and that might also make a contribution to society as a whole. On the whole, I think, it'll be a really welcome boost of confidence for a lot of people. I think a lot of people have felt quite flat. They felt a little bit down, possibly subdued, and I think Jupiter is really going to sort of give us all the kind of boost that we need to take us into the new year. So that's really good news. So then on to the Saturn-Pluto conjunction in January. So this will occur just after the full moon lunar eclipse in Cancer, which will happen on the 10th of January 2020. And as I said, this really will bring to an end the cycle that began on the 2nd of July with the Cancer solar eclipse. So that will be sort of major releasing. Now, Saturn and Pluto are interesting for a number of reasons. You could say that before Pluto was discovered in the 1930s, that Saturn really embodied the qualities that we now see associated with Pluto. So Saturn, was the planet of death. It was the planet of old age. It was considered to be, it was associated with the scythe, so the Grim Reaper. So it's sort of cutting back, cutting away, stripping things to the bare bones. So the sort of the lean months of winter, and now that we've had Pluto sort of join the mix, Pluto's kind of taken on that, also that sort of element of death, but also rebirth. Pluto's very much associated with the phoenix. So there's that sense of, after death, perhaps a dark night of the soul, or a kind of traveling through the underworld, and then a rebirth following that. So that's an underlying cycle just to be aware of as we enter January. And of course, what a great time for a rebirth. As the light is returning to the northern hemisphere and we're beginning a new year and a new decade, it's really great energy to have. That being said, it's not the easiest combination of planets. These are planets that are very serious. These are planets that don't really compromise or give way gracefully. So the lesson here, and I think this ties into the Sabian symbol for the December 26th eclipse, is really, this is going to be a kind of a choice point where we sort of say to ourselves, are we going to embrace change, we as a collective, the planet? Are we going to embrace change, or are we going to resist change and continue to live in a sort of fear-based mentality of scarcity and of kind of us against them, or everyone's in it for themselves and we don't really care about the planet, that kind of thing? Are we going to live in that energy? Are we going to continue to live in that energy, or are we willing to move forward with grace and make a transition into a better way of living that will also involve more abundance, more grace, more ease, more flow? So I think, we as a collective are going to kind of come to that point and be forced to ask ourselves that question. The other thing that both these planets have in common is that they are concerned with truth. So there's a real sense of stripping away masks, pretension, excess. So kind of getting back to basics, getting to the truth about things. And it may be at that time that we have some revelations in the public domain about abuse of power, corruption, that sort of come to the surface. And if so, I think we should see it as a collective as a time of necessary purging. The thing to avoid here, though, is scapegoating, which is another quite common aspect of associated with Capricorn. So we just have to be a little bit careful that we don't project too much onto certain individuals, things that we may be very easily guilty of ourselves to a certain degree. That's just something to bear in mind. The other thing to say about the Saturn-Pluto conjunction is that this is real magician energy. So the potential for manifestation is enormous. The key is to set your intentions at the 26th of December solar eclipse, so that you're kind of ready to move into a phase of manifestation, which will culminate at the full moon in Cancer, a couple of days before the conjunction. The other thing that it also, another signature of Saturn and Pluto in Capricorn, is a sense of achievements of substance, but ones that are hard won, and that often follow a period of either suffering or kind of times of patient endurance. And I think that's going to ring true for a lot of people. I think that 2019 was very much like that for a lot of people. And let's face it, that Saturn-Pluto energy has been around pretty much for 2019. We had Saturn and Pluto coming together in the early months of this year. They then separated because of retrograde motion. So they've been kind of coming in and going out of all of each other all year. So we've had a taste of what this energy is like, and I think a lot of people have already started to go through that kind of dark night of the soul or purging of karma, because that's the other way to look at this kind of energy. We're talking about divine justice here. So I do think that when we come to the 12th of January, we're going to also find ourselves coming into a cycle that has to do with divine justice. So a rebalancing of the scales, whether that be in terms of, a kind of balancing out in the collective domain of the haves versus the have-nots, those who have power and those who don't. And perhaps also between masculine and feminine energies, because these two planets of themselves are quite masculine in terms of energy. Even though Capricorn is considered to be a feminine sign, Saturn is a diurnal planet. Pluto, on the whole, is quite a non-compromising quite a masculine energy, even though it tends to sort of fly under the radar and do things under the cloak of invisibility. So I think that it's possible that we might also see certain patterns to do with patriarchy kind of coming up to be challenged. And on a personal level, this could also be about stepping up, developing a sense of inner authority, and of kind of coming to terms with certain power structures and how we kind of respond to those. You know, social conventions too. It's about sort of finding your niche, kind of going forward. But I don't think it's not going to be a case of, you know, one movement and it's done. I think we need to see this first of all as a 6 month sort of cycle, and then possibly longer than that, because these two planets move quite slowly, and as I said, they are a continuation of changes that have been happening from 2008, 2017, when Saturn moved into Capricorn. So that's just something to bear in mind as we come into this eclipse season. As I said, I am going to be looking at these eclipses in relation to the 12 zodiac signs individually. I'll just sort of finish off by saying that good keywords for Pluto are sort of reform, restructure, revelations, and rebirth. And for Saturn, it's things like boundaries, limitations, cutting back, and authority and responsibility. So those are good kind of keywords to bear in mind when you're sort of thinking about your own take on this particular set of events. But anyway, I think that's probably more than enough for one video. I hope you have a wonderful festive season. All the best for 2020, and hopefully see you again soon.